Now we're going to tie a lime Trude. This is a typical downwing attractor pattern. It's got a nice bright white wing. It'll cross for stoneflies, little yellow sallies, caddis, even beetles in some cases. It's tied on a Tiemco 100 SPBL standard dry fly hook. The tail is a golden pheasant tippet feather. The body is going to be some chartreuse rabbit dubbing. The wing is calf body hair. And we're going to finish it off with a couple of brown hackle feathers, rooster hackle feathers there on the front. I'm going to use black 8/0 thread. I'll start the thread just about the midpoint or so on the hook. And we'll make a nice even thread base back to the bend. Now we're going to put in some golden pheasant tippet for the tails. And there's a little trick to this. You can see how I've kind of preened this feather and stripped everything off the butt ends. I want to use the orange tips of this feather with the black stripe. So I'll separate out a section. And I don't need a whole lot. This is not a terribly stiff feather. It's more for color than anything. But I want to try to keep that set up straight so I've got nice even bands on the end. So I'll grab that clump and I'll strip it off the stem. So I've still got the tip straight. And then I'll bundle it up into a nice little bunch. I'm going to measure about a shank length long. Tie it in right at the bend. So we've got a nice little clump of a tail. I'll wrap forward over those butt ends, back to about the midpoint on the hook, and I'll trim those butts down. Now we'll dub the abdomen. This rabbit fur is going to dub nice and tight on the thread. I've stripped all the guard hairs out of it. And I like the rabbit because it's a little more opaque. It's not quite as translucent as some of the synthetic dubbings, so it'll leave us a nice bright green colored body. Of course, you can tie a Trude with a peacock body and have a coachman Trude, the red floss and peacock curl segments like you would on a royal wolf, and have a royal Trude. A lot of variations on the theme. The common thread being the white downwing on top of the fly. That's what makes the Trude a Trude. So I've dubbed the thread. I'm going to use my bare thread here to work back to the bend. And I'm going to build a relatively chunky body coming forward. And instead of ending up with a real square shoulder here, I want to taper that down just a little bit as I come forward. If I have a real square shoulder on the front of that dubbing, it's going to press my wing up and make it stand more upright than I like. I want it to lay down a little more flat. Now that I'm back down on bare shank, I'll make a thread base all the way up to the eye and back to the front edge of the body one more time. Now we're going to take a little clump of calf body hair, and it doesn't take much on a fly like this. This wing isn't going to be obstructed by the hackle, so it's not going to take very much hair to make a wing that's going to be very visible to us. So I'll take a clump of this calf hair. I'm going to clean all the underfur out of it, all the short hairs. Anything that's extra long or curvy, I'll strip out as well. And I'll put this tips down in my stacker and give it a few wraps to even the tips. I'm going to take my clump of calf hair now, and I'm going to measure it a shank length long. And I'm going from the back edge of the hook eye to the bend of the hook. Then I'm going to bump that back so it'll intersect about halfway up the tail when you've measured it right. I'm going to bump that back, tie it down with a couple turns right at the front edge of the body. Then I'll start to make a band of thread here to anchor everything in place. Now I can let go and the wing will be pressed right flat on top of the body. Now these butt ends are going to make a little bit of a problem to wrap the hackle over if I was to come in and just cut them off square. So we want to cut this at a taper, and it's a little bit of an odd angle for me, using the scissors in my right hand and tying left-handed. But I'm going to come in from the bottom and trim those off at an angle. Missed a few fibers here. I'll just clean those up. So I've got a tapered base to wrap the hackle down. Now, the tapered base itself can cause a few problems, and I'll show you a trick to wrap the hackle here so things come out a little more smoothly. And this works great on any sort of a tapered base that you're trying to wrap a hackle feather over. I'm going to run the thread back up to the base of the wing, and you can see I'm just a little less than half a shank of room for the hackle. So we've got a fairly heavily hackled fly coming. I'm going to take 2 brown hackle feathers, and you can certainly do this with a brown and a grizzly as well. I'll take my 2 brown hackle feathers and I'm going to strip just a little less than a half a shank of bare stem. I'll set these 2 feathers in at the base of the wing and tie them in with just a little bit of bare stem extending beyond the tie-in point. And I'll wrap forward over their stems right up to the hook eye, and then I'll bring the thread back to the base of the wing. Now you can see that sort of accentuated that taper that we put in there, which seems counterintuitive, but we're going to let that work for us rather than against us. Note where my thread is hanging now at the base of the wing. I'm going to take my 2 feathers. I'm not moving the thread forward. I'm going to let the hackle feathers push the thread forward as I wrap. And that'll also keep the hackles from sliding down that ramp that we've built with the taper of the butt ends of the hair. I'm going to start wrapping at the back of the, or base of the wing, and I'll work forward. And you can see how the thread is just being pushed forward with each turn of hackle as I come forward to the hook eye. See how we got a nice, clean, tight hackle collar all pressed in there under tension with that thread wrap. Now I'm going to come in and trim out my hackle feather. Any loose ends I'll trim out as well. I'm going to build just a few turns for a thread head to cover the stub ends of those feathers. And we'll tie our whip finish just behind the eye. Come in and trim your thread out. And that's our lime Trude, a great little attractor fly, lots of color variations, a good one to have in your fly box.